You're about to find out where the phrase all brawn and no brains came from. In this video, we're going to look into the cautionary and very frustrating tale of Samson. I'm sure most of you have heard of Samson before as being the strongest man to ever exist, or some version of that. What you probably didn't hear, Samson was an idiot. Oh yeah. Probably not how they phrased it in Sunday school, but as you will see, a very accurate description. God created Samson for a very specific, very explicit purpose, and Samson totally messed it up. Mostly. Don't be Samson. We begin in Judges chapter 13. This story takes place at a time where the Israelites were subjected to a nation called the Philistines. Before Samson was even born, God came to Samson's mother and told her if she followed these certain rules while she was pregnant, and once her son was born, if they never cut or shaved his head, he would begin the deliverance of Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Easy enough. Other than Samson being born, he is introduced into this story as an adult. And right from the beginning, you can kind of already see what is going to be Samson's downfall. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." His father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." Going back, pretty much since the beginning, God had told his chosen people not to marry foreigners or people outside of the Israelites. Might seem kind of racist, but when you consider the fact that all these other tribes worshipped false gods and or demons, having a rule about not getting linked up with them seems a lot more reasonable. But right away we see Samson break that command simply because he found a pretty girl. Ow! As you heard, his parents tried to talk him out of it, but to no avail. Shortly after, Samson is attacked by a lion, and I quote, "And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands." This is the first time that we get a look at the fact that Samson has God-given superhuman strength. Samson goes to marry the Philistine woman at her father's house. He ends up making a bet with some of the people there, betting them that they can't solve his riddle. And sure enough, they couldn't figure it out, so they decide to use Samson's wife against him. On the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to rob us?" Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me! You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother," he replied. "So why should I explain it to you?" She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the seventh day, he finally told her because she continued to press him. She, in turn, explained the riddle to her people. She tells, and Samson loses the bet. And he knows exactly how he lost, too. One thing leads to another, and Samson's father-in-law actually marries his new wife off to somebody else, and then the father and daughter get killed. And then Samson fights and kills 1,000 Philistine soldiers with the jawbone of a donkey, which apparently is sufficient if you have super strength. God even creates a spring of water for Samson after the battle. Samson put himself into a situation he shouldn't have even been in, and God still used that situation to put even more animosity between Samson and the Philistines to help drive Samson towards his purpose. 20 years go by, and we find Samson with a prostitute. Another blatant command he is breaking, despite being called for such a high purpose. Then he meets and falls in love with another Philistine woman, Delilah. Apparently, he forgot how it went last time. Some Philistine leaders go to Delilah and offer her a fortune to find out the secret to Samson's super strength, because they wanted him gone. Listen to how that went. prepare to be frustrated. So Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." He said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then, with men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, "Until now you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. Again she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say, 'I love you,' when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging she prodded him day after day until he was tired to death. So he told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazirite set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with silver in their hands. Having put him to sleep on her lap, she called a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called to Samson, "The Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding in the prison. This lady betrays his trust 3 times, and he still ends up telling her the real secret. He knew it was a bad idea to tell her the truth, otherwise he wouldn't have lied in the first place. But she was pretty much saying, if you want to be with me, you have to tell me. And eventually, he decided to forsake God rather than not have this woman. Now imagine being Samson, sitting there in prison, beaten, eyes gouged out, knowing it is 100% your own fault. And knowing that you were supposed to save your people, but instead got distracted and chased women to the point of it almost killing you. The story has a slightly redeeming ending though. The Philistine rulers threw a party in one of their temples and brought Samson out to entertain them. Samson knows his life is pretty much over, so he asked God to grant him his strength one last time. God does, and Samson pushes over the 2 main pillars in the temple, bringing the whole building down on them, killing himself and 3,000 Philistine rulers. So, Samson had the last laugh, but just barely. It didn't have to be like this. Samson could have behaved and fulfilled the role God had for him, and he would have been a mighty conqueror and leader for his people. But instead, he kept giving into his lust and chasing after women and putting himself into life-threatening situations he didn't even have to be in. Don't be Samson. Find your purpose in God and stick with it. Talk with God and have Him guide you towards your purpose. And you can also bet that you won't be truly happy until you're on the path that God designed for you. And that being said, there's no time to waste. Thank you for watching, and God bless.